Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring a stack of sources that chronicle the just extraordinary career of Katherine Johnson,
Right.
the mathematical genius who truly earned the title human computer.
She really did. We're looking at her 33 years of service, first to NASA and then, of course, to NASA.
And it's a career that spans from, the very earliest days of aviation research right through to charting a path to Mars. It's an incredible scope.
It is. And our mission today is to dig into not just what she calculated, which is mind-boggling on its own.
Oh, absolutely. The paths for the first American in space, the first orbital flight, Apollo 11.
The moon landing, exactly. But we want to explore how she did it, and maybe more importantly, how her just unwavering professional competence forced these huge systemic barriers of race and gender to just crumble around her.
That is the ultimate takeaway, isn't it? And we really need to weave that thread through this whole deep dive because she was a mathematician of such profound accuracy that when NASA decided to adopt the very first electronic computers, the astronauts themselves,
Yeah, get this.
the people whose lives were on the line, they were, understandably nervous about trusting a machine. And they insisted that Johnson personally check the new digital numbers.
That one moment, it says everything. When John Glenn basically staked his life on her pencil and paper calculations rather than $1 million machine.
Right.
It's the perfect illustration of what we are calling expertise as currency. And we're going to spend a lot of time unpacking the context of that moment.
Because it didn't just happen by accident.
Not at all. It was built on a lifetime of defying expectations every single step of the way.
Okay, so let's unpack this incredible journey. Let's start right at the foundation. How does a young woman from segregated West Virginia become the guiding force behind this space race? We have to look at her beginnings.
You do. Katherine Johnson was born Creola Catherine Coleman in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, back in 1918. And her background, it was already sort of geared toward education. Her mother, Joylette, was a teacher, and her father, Joshua, was a remarkably industrious man. He was a lumberman, a farmer, a handyman, and he also held a job at the famous Greenbrier Hotel.
And she was the youngest of four.
Youngest of four. And what's immediately striking from the sources is just how early her mathematical genius became apparent.
And because of that, how quickly her family had to make these immense sacrifices just to nurture that talent.
The sacrifices were, they were systemic. They were dictated by Jim Crow laws. Greenbrier County, like so much of the segregated South, simply did not offer public schooling for African-American students past the 8th grade.
So that was it, the end of the line for education.
That was supposed to be it. So if her children were going to have a high school education, her parents had to engineer it themselves.
And their solution was profound. They arranged for the children to attend high school in a town called Institute in West Virginia.
Right, which was located on the campus of West Virginia State College, WVSC, a historically black college.
So how did the family even manage the logistics of that? That's a huge undertaking.
It wasn't just a long commute. It was a fundamental split. The family had to essentially operate two households. They would split their time living in Institute for the entire school year just so the children could access the higher education they deserved.
That dedication.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes about what they saw in their children, especially in Katherine.
And that belief was, very quickly validated by what the sources call her prodigy status. She wasn't just catching up, she was leaping ahead.
Way ahead.
She was. She enrolled in high school at the astonishing age of 10.
10?
10 years old, having skipped multiple grades. And by the time she was 14, she had graduated high school and immediately enrolled at WVSC.
To put that in perspective, her peers were likely 18 or 19 years old. She's a college freshman when most kids are just starting high school.
Exactly. And once she was in college, it seems her potential was immediately recognized by her mentors. She didn't just study mathematics, she basically exhausted the curriculum.
She took every single mathematics course WVSC offered.
Every single one. Her intellect just demanded this rigorous attention, and she was lucky to have two exceptional mentors.
Right, there was Angie Turner King, a chemist and mathematician,
who guided her during high school and college. But the truly unique relationship, the one that really shaped her, was with W.W. Schieffelin-Claytor.
And Claytor is a huge figure in academic history. He was only the third African-American to receive a doctorate in mathematics in the entire country at that time.
An absolute giant in the field.
Yeah.
And he was so impressed by her capacity that, according to the sources, he actually created new advanced mathematics courses just for her.
Wait, he created new courses?
Just for her. Think about that. The college curriculum itself wasn't challenging enough, so one of the nation's foremost black mathematicians customized her education.
That tells you everything you need to know about the depth of her talent.
It really does. So she graduates summa cum laude at age 18 in 1937 with degrees in both mathematics and French.
But the journey wasn't over. She married her first husband, James Goebel, taught for a bit, and then in 1939, she decides to push yet another boundary by enrolling in graduate school.
And this is a moment of, profound, if quiet, historical significance. She became the very first African-American woman to attend graduate school at West Virginia University in Morgantown. And she didn't get there just by applying. She got there because of a seismic shift in civil rights law.
Let's contextualize that legal shift for a moment. This was a direct result of the 1938 Supreme Court ruling, Missouri Ex Rel. Gaines v. Canada. What exactly did that ruling mandate? Why was it so critical for her?
So the Gaines ruling was a major crack in the legal wall of separate but equal in higher education. Lloyd Gaines had been denied admission to the University of Missouri Law School because he was black.
And Missouri had no comparable law school for black students.
Exactly. So the Supreme Court effectively ruled that states that offered public higher education to white students had to offer the same quality of education to black students. They either had to create separate but truly equal institutions, which was, almost impossible.
Or they had to integrate the existing ones.
Or they had to integrate. So the state of West Virginia was suddenly under a lot of pressure. And instead of trying to build a whole separate graduate math program, which they couldn't do,
They were forced to offer integration.
they were. And this ruling created this narrow but absolutely critical window of opportunity for Johnson. She was one of only 3 African-American students selected to integrate the graduate school program at WVU.
And the only woman.
And the only woman. She was a test case for desegregation policy, balancing the weight of national legal history on her shoulders while, trying to master advanced calculus.
That's just immense pressure, especially as a young wife.
And then she decided to leave after the first session. The sources are really clear that her departure was purely focused on family.
All right, she was starting a family. It wasn't academic failure or racial pressure.
Not at all. She was expecting her first child and chose to focus on that. But the fact remains, she proved that she belonged there. She cemented her role as an educational pioneer, paving the way for those who would follow, even if her own time there was short.
She had proven her genius, taken her stand, and then prioritized her life at home. Okay, let's jump ahead now to 1953. Her daughters are older. She's ready to get back to work. This is when she enters the world of aeronautics and the legendary NASA.
Right. She returned to teaching for a while, but in 1952, she heard that the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics NACIA, the predecessor to NASA, was hiring mathematicians.
And not just any mathematicians, specifically for their West Area Computing section at the Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory in Hampton, Virginia.
She applied, and she accepted the job offer in June 1953.
This is where that term human computer truly takes on meaning. What was the day-to-day role of these women in the computing pool? I mean, the job description sounds so abstract, but the work was absolutely fundamental.
It was grueling, detail-oriented work. The sources famously refer to them as virtual computers who wore skirts.
I love that phrase.
It's perfect. Their primary job in the early days was supporting the aeronautics division. This meant working with raw telemetry data from the planes data from the black boxes.
So they weren't just reading numbers, they were manually translating raw physics into meaningful parameters.
Precisely. They'd take this raw data and, using slide rules and charts and just intense concentration, perform these complex calculations for aerodynamic research. For instance, some of her very early work included calculating gust alleviation for aircraft.
Okay, we need to stop there and explain that. What exactly is gust alleviation, and why do they need human computers to calculate it?
It's absolutely critical for an aircraft's structural integrity. When a plane is flying, it's constantly hitting these sudden changes in air pressure gusts.
Right, turbulence.
Exactly. And these gusts can stress the plane's wings and its frame in really unpredictable ways. The human computers had to calculate the precise, instantaneous adjustments needed to counteract these forces.
So it's about keeping the plane stable.
Stable and, crucially, making sure it didn't exceed the structural limits of the material. It was precise, real-time risk management translated into pure mathematics.
So she's dealing with the most complex, minute aerodynamic forces, relying solely on her brain and her tools. But she's doing this in a deeply, deeply segregated environment.
That's the core tragedy and triumph of her early MPO years. Johnson was assigned to the colored computers section, which was supervised by the legendary Dorothy Vaughan.
And they were subject to Virginia state segregation laws.
And federal policy. So these African-American women were mandated to use separate facilities, separate working spaces, separate dining areas, separate restrooms from their white colleagues.
It's such a jarring contradiction.
Yeah.
You have the brightest minds in the country solving problems that will eventually take us to the moon.
And they couldn't share a water fountain.
Unbelievable.
Yet, Johnson's personal perspective on how she navigated this is fascinating. It's so rooted in her professional identity.
Right. She said that while she was aware of the segregation, she didn't feel it in her daily work.
Her exact quote was something like, "You had a mission and you worked on it, and it was important to you to do your job. I didn't feel any segregation. I knew it was there, but I didn't feel it."
That unwavering focus on the mission over the institutional distraction, it seems like that was her shield.
It was. And that focus, that sheer competence, is what rapidly propelled her out of the segregated computing pool and into this elite, all-male domain.
Her move was so fast and purely based on merit. She was assigned initially just temporarily to the all-male guidance and control division of flight research.
And they very quickly discovered that she possessed this unparalleled knowledge of analytic geometry.
Let's elaborate on that. Why was that specific field of math analytic geometry the key that unlocked her future in space exploration? Why was it so valuable for trajectory work?
Well, analytic geometry is basically the study of geometry using a coordinate system. It combines algebra and geometry. And for trajectory work, especially in the pre-digital age, that combination was indispensable.
Because it lets you visualize these complex paths.
Exactly. You can represent these three-dimensional orbital path circles, parabolas, ellipses, using algebraic equations.
So instead of just abstract numbers, she could translate the equations into plots and graphs that engineers could immediately verify and understand.
Precisely. For a human computer, this was essential. It made quick, accurate manual plotting and verification possible in a way that, pure abstract calculus couldn't facilitate as quickly or intuitively. She could see the path of a capsule through space in real time, on paper.
And her new colleagues recognized this immediately.
Oh, yeah. The famous anecdote is that they just forgot to return her to the pool. She was simply too valuable.
That is a moment where her expertise truly starts to dismantle those systemic barriers. Her skill, not her gender or race, became the only metric that mattered. She made herself indispensable.
But even after moving out of the colored computer section, she ran headfirst into the deeply entrenched gender discrimination of the era.
Right. The work was the same, but the credit wasn't.
Not at all. Women were historically forbidden from putting their names on official reports in her division.
So she'd overcome one barrier only to slam into another one. How did she break that crucial policy of getting her name on the reports?
She approached it with the same quiet but, firm assertiveness she used to navigate segregation. She just demanded what she had earned.
She insisted on being in the meetings.
The editorial and review meetings, places where absolutely no women had gone before. And her logic was simple and undeniable. I did the work, so I should be there. She saw herself as a scientist first.
And the sources have a great anecdote about her colleague, Ted Skopinski,
Yeah.
that really sealed the deal.
Yes, this was the turning point, around 1960. She's working closely with Skopinski on this major technical note. And their supervisor, Henry Pearson, who was notoriously skeptical of women in that high-level role, was pushing Skopinski to finish the draft.
But Skopinski had to leave town.
He had to leave for Houston. So under pressure, he basically throws up his hands and tells Pearson, Katherine should finish the report. She's done most of the work anyway.
That's a brilliant move. It left the supervisor with no choice.
None. Johnson finished the report. And as a result, her name appeared on that 1960 NASA technical note. Determination of azimuth angle at burnout for placing a satellite over a selected Earth position.
And that was the first time a woman in her division was officially credited as a co-author.
A massive, quiet victory that set a precedent for all the women who followed her. And from 1958 onward, after NASA became NASA, she worked for the Spacecraft Controls Branch right up until she retired in 1986.
Which brings us to the core of her historical contribution, calculating the success of the space race. This is when the stakes moved from a plane's wing stability to ensuring a human life could reach orbit and return.
It's a completely different level of pressure. The transition from aeronautics to astronautics was a huge leap, and Johnson was right there, making the calculations for Project Mercury.
America's very first crewed space effort.
Right. And she was responsible for calculating the trajectory for Alan Shepard's flight on May 5, 1961, which made him the first American in space.
And that's more than just knowing where the rocket is going. You need precise timing for launch windows, contingency plans.
That's right. She didn't just calculate the ballistic arc, she calculated the launch window, that precise moment in time when all the gravitational and orbital conditions aligned for a safe launch.
And the backup charts?
Critically, yes. She plotted backup navigation charts for the astronauts to use in case of electronic failures. Remember, these early missions were incredibly primitive compared to today.
Her accuracy was also key for search and rescue.
Essential. It allowed the recovery crews to quickly find Shepard's Freedom 7 capsule after splashdown in the ocean.
Her work in '61 established her reliability, but it was 1962 that cemented her legendary status. This leads right to that John Glenn anecdote we teased at the start.
The Friendship 7 mission. This was supposed to be the first American orbital flight, a much more complex problem.
And for this, NASA was finally transitioning to using these new electronic digital computers to calculate the orbit.
But while the machines were powerful, there was this profound skepticism among the engineers, and especially the astronauts, about their reliability. The stakes were just too high to trust this untested digital future.
And John Glenn himself was the one who demanded the human verification. What did he say exactly?
He famously requested that Johnson personally recheck the computer's output. His words, as they're recounted, were that if that girl said the numbers were right, then he was ready to fly.
That girl.
That girl. He refused to launch unless she had verified the machine's calculations by hand.
That is just an astonishing historical footnote. The future of the American space program, the nation's trust in this groundbreaking million-dollar electronic age, it all rested on one woman's ability to work through pages of equations with a pencil and paper.
It completely underscores the power of reputation and competence. In that moment, Johnson's proven accuracy superseded faith in the new technology.
And she did it.
She spent days working around the clock, reproducing the computer's entire flight plan, verifying its trajectory, launch windows, everything. When she finally signed off on the numbers, Glenn flew.
So her work wasn't just for Glenn's safety. It was about establishing confidence in digital computing for the entire agency moving forward.
She was the ultimate quality control. She taught the U.S. space program how to trust the future by verifying it with the past.
Absolutely. And as the missions grew more ambitious, so did her role. She was critical throughout the entire Apollo program.
In 1969, she helped calculate the trajectory for the historic Apollo 11 flight to the moon.
It's a little bittersweet to think that she charted the path for humanity's first steps on another world. But she wasn't even in mission control when it happened.
No, she was at a meeting in the Pocono Mountains at the time. She recounted watching the first steps on the moon crowded around a small television screen with her colleagues. Even in that moment, she was just focused on the next set of calculations.
And the next set of calculations became arguably the most crucial of her entire career, the crisis of Apollo 13 in 1970.
Her contributions during Apollo 13 were, without a doubt, life-saving. When the oxygen tank exploded, the mission was aborted. Suddenly, these astronauts were facing imminent peril.
Their primary navigation systems were offline. They had limited power.
Limited everything. They needed a way to manually determine their position accurately, to correct their course, and ensure a safe return path to Earth.
And the sources highlight her role in creating the one-star observation system. Can you detail the problem they faced and how her system practically solved it?
So the standard navigation procedure relied on sighting multiple stars, usually 2 or 3, to get a precise fix on their location.
But that was impossible.
It was impossible. Because of the debris field from the explosion, the limited visibility, the power constraints, using multiple stars was off the table.
So Johnson's task was to figure out how to navigate using minimal damaged resources.
Exactly. She used her deep knowledge of celestial mechanics and analytic geometry to devise a system where the astronauts only needed to sight one single star to determine their location with enough accuracy to get home.
That is a phenomenal piece of rapid response applied mathematics.
It is. She had to create these complex charts and backup procedures that accounted for all the gravitational variables, the Earth's rotation, the changing position of the damaged spacecraft, and condense it all down to a single navigational input.
That's the ultimate test of an expert. Not just solving a problem, but solving an unprecedented crisis under an impossible deadline. She wasn't just calculating a path, she was calculating an escape route.
That's how she saw it. She recalled the difference in focus. Everybody was concerned about them getting there. We were concerned about them getting back. Her system gave the crew the tools they needed to make the necessary course corrections that ultimately allowed them to splash down safely.
Her impact didn't stop with the moon, though. Before she retired in 1986, she continued to influence the future of the agency.
Yeah, she rounded out her career contributing to the Space Shuttle program, focusing on the aerodynamics and orbital mechanics of reusable flight. She also worked on the Earth Resources Satellite program.
An early foray into studying our own planet from orbit.
Right. And perhaps most futuristically, she contributed to the preliminary plans and calculations for a human mission to Mars.
A phenomenal 33-year run. From gust alleviation in the 50s to charting the first steps for a Mars mission in the 80s. Her career just underpins virtually every critical phase of U.S. space exploration.
It really does. And that contribution, it wasn't recognized with the full scope of civilian honors until much, much later in her life.
Before we get to the honors, let's just briefly touch on her commitment after retirement. She didn't just fade away.
Not at all. She became a major champion for the next generation. She spent her later decades actively encouraging students, particularly minority and female students, to pursue careers in STEM.
She wanted to make sure they didn't face the same barriers she did.
And she wanted them to understand that competence was their strongest advocate. And she left a massive technical legacy, co-authoring 26 scientific papers.
Okay, now let's discuss the recognition, which came relatively late, really gaining steam after the Hidden Figures story became more widely known.
The honors were immense, and they culminated in the highest civilian distinctions. In 2015, President Barack Obama awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
The highest civilian honor in the United States.
It is, and Obama specifically said that Johnson refused to be limited by society's expectations of her gender and race while expanding the boundaries of humanity's reach.
And that timing is important. It's just before the film came out, and the honors just kept pouring in after that, including the Congressional Gold Medal in 2019.
And beyond the government, the aerospace community itself cemented her legacy. In 2016, she received the Silver Snoopy Award,
which is often called the Astronaut's Award.
It is. It's for outstanding contributions to mission success, and it's a pin that has actually flown into space. It really highlights the respect she commanded among the flyers themselves.
And NASA has literally written her name into its buildings, into the firmament. They named 2 major facilities after her.
That's right. The first was the Katherine G. Johnson Computational Research Facility, dedicated in 2017 at Langley. A powerful statement, naming a major computational center after the greatest human computer.
And the second?
The Katherine Johnson Independent Verification and Validation Facility in Fairmont, West Virginia, renamed in 2019. Verification and validation, the core of her life's work, permanently attached to her name.
And her name is now literally orbiting the Earth.
It is, which is just a perfect tribute. In 2020, the U.S. Space Force named a GPS satellite the Crayola Katherine Johnson. And in 2021, Northrop Grumman named its Cygnus supply spacecraft for the SS Katherine Johnson. There was even a commercial satellite named Katherine.
The cultural recognition, of course, was driven hugely by the 2016 film Hidden Figures.
Absolutely. She was portrayed by Taraji P. Henson, and the film's success just brought her story to the masses. She received a massive standing ovation at the Academy Awards. It really cemented her place in the public consciousness.
And that media exposure just fueled this huge wave of educational honors.
She was inducted posthumously into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 2021, the National Aviation Hall of Fame in 2024. And her impact is visible at the community level, too.
Right. Multiple schools across the country are named for her now.
Virginia, Texas, Washington, California, all over. And yes, even pop culture recognized her importance when Mattel released a Barbie doll in her likeness in 2018.
That's when you know you've made it.
She is now a universally recognized symbol of intellectual triumph over adversity.
She lived a remarkably long life. She was married twice, had 3 daughters, and lived to the incredible age of 101, passing away in 2020.
Her death was met with widespread national mourning. NASA's administrator called her an American hero whose pioneering legacy will never be forgotten.
So what does this all synthesize into? We've covered this massive breadth of her career, from defying segregation laws in education to calculating the safety of astronauts returning from the moon.
The summary takeaway from this deep dive is, I think, very clear. Katherine Johnson was a mathematical genius who had to fight state segregation laws just to get a basic education.
Right.
Yet she channeled that talent into becoming the single most trusted human asset in the burgeoning American space program. Her calculations were fundamental to achieving America's greatest technical triumphs of the 20th century.
And the core synthesis is exactly where we started.
Yeah.
That competence and mastery are not just professional skills. They are powerful, tangible tools for overcoming systemic bias.
Her knowledge of analytic geometry was unparalleled. Her rock-solid reputation for accuracy. Those were the keys that unlocked access to the highest echelons of space exploration, regardless of the era's deeply embedded prejudices.
Her expertise was her undeniable currency. It transcended the color of her skin and the gender barrier of her division. When the astronaut said, "I trust her numbers more than the machine," he was validating that very idea.
That verifiable, consistent competence is the ultimate force multiplier in any career.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. Katherine Johnson achieved breakthroughs, in part by simply asserting her right to be present. She didn't wait for permission to be invited to those editorial meetings where no women had gone before. She just walked in and told people she belonged there because she had done the necessary mission-critical work.
So consider this power of expertise as currency in your own professional life. How can you leverage your own verified, undeniable knowledge and confidence to break down barriers in your field?
Right. If you've put in the hours, if you've done the calculation, how do you assert your right? Not politely ask, but actively demand a seat at the table when your expertise proves that you are essential to the mission's success.
Something to mull over as you pursue your own big launches.
Thanks for joining us for the deep dive. We'll be back next time with another stack of sources.